intellect, our creative genius, our music and everything has been hijacked with these demeaning and demoralizing and divisive messages. And that's our creativity. And we need to reclaim that.
Filmmaker Mikki Willis is the creator of the Plandemic documentary series. In this episode, we dive into KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov's warnings to the West in 1984 and how he proved shockingly prescient.
We know how to navigate military war, but when it's a psychological war, one of the deadliest things that any nation has ever said is that can never happen here.
And we discuss Mikki's upcoming release, Plandemic, the musical.
Everyone's trying to evade being canceled these days. So I say to everyone, get canceled.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Mikki Willis, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thanks, Jan. It's great to finally be here.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you. We've talked offline a lot about Yuri Bezmenov.
Yes.
And Yuri Bezmenov, back in the 80s, I think it was 1984.
Ironically.
Ironically or unironically, I don't know actually these days, right? He talked about subversion. He talked about active measures. He talks in a language, and you've put together this, amazing short kind of that encapsulates, all of his ideas that he was trying to desperately share in 1984 or earlier, right? That when we see them today, we're thinking, my God, this has all happened. I mean, was he prescient? Like what, or did this actually happen?
Well, I think that's the scary part, really, and why I keep drawing from historic warnings, like the work that I featured in The Great Awakening with G. Edward Griffin and his historic warning in the 60s. He was telling everyone that communism was not dead, it was coming, and that we need to beware. And then in 1984, that same man, G. Edward Griffin, interviewed Yuri Bezmenov. And here we have a KGB defector, a man who escaped once he realized truly what kind of psychological subversion that the Soviet forces were forcing upon other nations around the world, and he made the trek to America, risked his life in a really, really high fashion, in the sense that if they knew where he was coming and what he was doing, he would have been taken out immediately. I mean, the bravery and the courage that it took for this man to come here, to go on camera and to warn America what was coming, and that there was something invisible. And that's the real terrifying part of this, is that we know how to navigate military war, but when it's a psychological war, when it's invisible and it's happening in such a way that even really wise, intelligent people can't perceive, that's the stuff that gets to even the most protected. And so he came here to let us know what was taking place, and he was shocked in the 80s because he didn't realize, he'd only see visions of America being this, land of the free, home of the brave, and he got here and realized how far advanced that the active measures already had reached in the United States, and it was shocking to him. So he took it upon himself to do interview after interview to warn us, America, let me tell you from my perspective as a former KGB propagandist, this is what's happening to the minds of your people, and you need to be very careful because, as he said in the film, time bomb is ticking and the danger is coming closer and closer.
The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer.
And no one listened to him. And I think one of the deadliest things that any nation has ever said is that can never happen here. And we've been saying that for too long, and now, unfortunately, it's happening here.
Our conversation is with Mr. Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate 1 generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students. The next stage is destabilization. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely.
What do we do? What is your recommendation to the American people?
Well, the immediate thing that comes to my mind is, of course, there must be a very strong national effort to educate people in the spirit of real patriotism, number 1. Number 2, to explain them the real danger of socialist, communist, whatever, welfare state, big brother government. If people will fail to grasp the impending danger of that development, nothing ever can help United States. You may kiss goodbye to your freedom. As I said, I am now in your boat. If we sing together, we'll sing beautifully together. There is no other place on this planet to defect to.
He was just seeing something that was actually happening. And I think to myself, how is it that so many of us just simply didn't grasp this at all? I mean, like not even a bit for the longest time.
It's time for all people to realize that we play a part in this awakening, that we all do. There's been this, well, by design, we've been wired to wait for the superhero to sweep in to save us. And it's never happened, and it never will happen. There's a real true calling if you understand what the work of Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey, what the hero always discovered on the journey ultimately, so much so that it's become cliche through a lot of the iconic movies that have used the hero journey structure, and that is the forces within, we are the one, we are the ones we've been waiting for, whatever the line is. The hero goes out to find, the reluctant hero goes out to find the hero only to discover that the journey was building him or her up to the point that they could dissolve everything that wasn't the hero so they could stand and truly awaken to the fact that they are the one they've been waiting for. And so, I think that's a very important message for the masses to understand right now, that it is like the cells in the body of an organism. All of us bring life, and all of us matter. And when the cells are fighting and when the cells are stagnant, the organism is not healthy. And so it's time for us to revive that call for life, that call to procreate, that call to take back our creative talents, our creative genius. Our music and everything has been hijacked with these demeaning and demoralizing and divisive messages. And that's our creativity. And we need to reclaim that and bring our truth and the light to shine into these dark moments. And for me, that is what we've been building towards for generations. And when I look at it from that perspective, I feel very fortunate to be alive in this moment and to get to play some little role in this awakening.
So I wanted to take a quick break to tell you about something that's actually quite important to me. I've been kind of resisting getting a sponsor for the show for some time. There's been numerous offers, let's just say. Patriot Gold Group came to me, and the gold is actually something that I've been thinking about quite a bit. because we're in very volatile times, very unpredictable times. So gold is the place that I think is one of the few kind of stable places to put money. And Patriot Gold Group is a good company. We checked them out. And so I bought some gold with them. And the value, and this is kind of crazy, since I bought it, I think about 3 weeks ago, of this gold has gone up by over $500. And this isn't a large amount of gold that I bought here. So let me show you what I got. So this is Rand Refinery 1 ounce fine gold bullion, the American Eagle, and 5 silver eagles. So I'm actually gonna pull out the gold eagle for you because it looks kind of awesome. Wow, it's got an amazing weight to it. So if you're inspired to buy some gold, I recommend you call Patriot Gold Group. You can call them at 888-857-0495, 888-857-0495. Mention American Thought Leaders. With that, let's head back to the interview. There's this other piece that I've been thinking about, the demoralization that we hear about in your piece with Yuri Bezmenov that you just talked about. There's a heck of a lot of people that are just deeply demoralized. They're deeply demoralized to the point where they're looking outside for solutions to people who they really should know a lot better can never provide them.
Well, you're touching on something that is a remaining issue for me and a major concern for me. I have two kids, 9 and 12 years old. And when I look at the level of demoralization that's taking place in America, I believe that a lot of the tyrannical policies and a lot of the movement towards the woke agenda and the ESGs and a lot of these things will be dissolved. And we'll come back to a place I think there's a lot of people waking up to have a sense of patriotism that they would otherwise not have, but they've learned to love their country through all this mess. So I think on one hand it's going to be, we're going to elevate our consciousness in to some degree, but this level of demoralization that is leading to mental illness is something that I can't see us being rid of that for a generation or so. And because what's happening out there, mostly through a lot of the apps that are indoctrinating our children from such a young age to believe that nature is so fallible that they could be in the wrong body, that there's no intelligent force that could possibly help them heal that dysfunction. And I look at that and I wonder sometimes, where is the safe space for my children? Where are they going to have really strong, very clear-headed boys that my wife and I have brought them into our world so they understand everything that's going on. They're very bulletproof to any of these ideologies. They hear a kid, at camp or whatever, and they'll come home and they'll say, you got to hear what these kids are saying, Dad. They know the difference between what's real and what's natural and these fabricated new ideologies. They know what's good for them, I'll put it that way. But it's been difficult as a parent that wants to grant our children freedom to go participate in sports and baseball and the trampoline park and all of that, but always have that thought in my mind of what are they going to encounter through this demoralized. And I have to warn them, because so many kids at a very young age now are watching porn, very, very young. And they start to talk about it. My 12-year-old son has already had kids say, hey, I want to show you something. He goes, my dad warned me about this. I don't want to see it. Because I told him what it will do to his mind. I said your curiosity will want to see it more than anything because there's some natural tendency in you to be curious about our gift of procreation. And so that's what causes us to be attracted to the opposite sex, that drive to procreate. So that's natural. But this form of sexuality that's hypersexuality and dark and demented, if you allow yourself in your formative years to experience that, it'll very likely negatively affect your relationships moving forward and the way you relate to women. So be very careful of the long-term effects of these curiosities. And thankfully, my boys so far have been really strong to resist seeing that stuff that they have been offered to see before.
Well, this is an issue that's incredibly important to me. My supposition is that this is one of the really huge elephant in the room issues that no one ever wants to talk about, probably because so many people have been compromised by it, right? I'm talking about this sort of ubiquitous, available, extreme from what's been described to me, because I also try to avoid it at all costs, porn, right? And available to, from the moment you hold a device instantly. Have you actually seen this whole, there's been as we're interviewing the last few days, people have been experimenting with this Google Gemini. Have you seen what's going on with that?
I haven't personally experimented with it.
Okay. But you get the idea.
Yes.
Okay. This probably must be one of the most powerful AIs out there, right? By Google, right? With the most comprehensive database of information probably out there. It misrepresents history and images in very extreme ways. It will not portray it won't portray white people positively. In some cases, it will refuse to portray them at all. Talking about ideological subversion, demoralization, this is kind of where we're at.
It's horrifying. It's really horrifying to see the level of subversion, psychological subversion, that if you think humans are capable of that, the AI can take it to the next level. And when we start to limit the honest portrayal of humanity through technology, it's a real issue. But it's not shocking to me at all at this point, understanding that if you back up to understand, first of all, what is the agenda? Well, America, because of our constitutional agreement to protect the individual from the possible tyranny of authoritarians, that is one of the main reasons that America, there are other countries that are far more beautiful, tropical, beautiful places, but no one is escaping. They're not escaping to America just for its beauty. They're escaping because of the constitutional protection, the individual rights that we're all granted with. They're escaping because they recognize that in their third world countries that the families have been diminished, that they don't quite have the freedom of speech that we're losing here in America day by day, to be themselves, to have that basic human right of expression. And so they all want to come here. Now, America being the firewall for the globalist agenda, and what that means is there's a major agenda, but now that to create a one world everything, a centralized power, centralized currencies, all of that, so that those who want total domination and control on a global level won't have outliers, certain countries that are playing a different game. And we saw that that's what's happened with COVID, where there were certain nations and certain states within our own nation that didn't play the game. And now we have outliers that we can look at and point towards as probably the best case studies we'll ever have to say, why is Africa 4% vaccinated and the people are doing better health-wise? Why did these nations or states that didn't close down their economy, didn't do social distancing, didn't force their citizens to lock down, why is their economy better and their health rates are better? What's happening there? And so for them to achieve their global agenda, they can't have these individual territories thinking for themselves. And so once you understand that that's at the root of their agenda, then you understand, well, if because of America's strength, not just military strength, but the pride in America, the spirit of America, Americans are very different than a lot of people around the world, for better and for worse. What then do you do to erode that firewall? You have to understand what that firewall is comprised of, and then what are the compounds that will erode and take down that wall. And that is the foundation of our nation. And so if you look at everything that is worth living and dying for, ask yourself, have your viewers ask yourself, what is worth living and dying for? And I guarantee you, whatever your answers are to that, those things are under attack. Some people would say faith, family, freedom, country. Every single one of those things are under attack. When you have the majority of Caucasian, European archetype of people, then of course, and that men are primally, intrinsically the protectors, the warriors, Of course, then, white men are going to be on that list of things that must be dissolved. They can't have that in the way of this agenda that is, I believe now more than ever, is failing. Now everyone's aware of it. And just in the past 4 years, that's the beauty of the tragedy of COVID, is that it allowed a lot of this stuff to come to light. And that's why my latest film, before the next one we're releasing, I decided to name The Great Awakening, because I truly believe that we are in the stage of the Great Awakening at this moment.
Remind us where you came from. We talked about you were on a short hit with me on an American Thought Leaders Now, but I would love it if you could just kind of remind us your journey to making these films, and focusing on Yuri Bezmenov, and frankly in other pieces realizing the true threat of the Chinese Communist Party, which I think is still a lot of people don't. But so tell me your story. Yeah.
Well, my story in a nutshell is that I was born and raised in California. And as a result of that, I had one political party to choose from, and that was the left. And I became I would say a far left progressive. I went on the road with Bernie Sanders in 2016 to produce media for him.
Well, why was that attractive to you? Like, why did you gravitate there, do you think?
Yeah, thank you. There is a backstory to that. And that is, so I was raised by a single mom. And she had 4 kids on her own, and she was part of the welfare system. And so Bernie's rhetoric about lifting up single mothers really reached me, because I thought to myself, I remember the first time I heard him speak, I said out loud, where was he when I was growing up? We were very poor. My sister stole toilet paper from the gas station at the end of the month, so we would run out of our funding. And but despite that, I always felt that I had a great life because I had a truly loving mother. And then my older brother, all my sisters and brothers were 14, 15, 16 years older than me. My older brother contracted AIDS. He was gay. And so I watched him live with AIDS for 8 years. And then Anthony Fauci came out and prescribed the medicine known as AZT. Now, my brother would have lived forever. He was doing well. But his doctors told him that this is the thing that will actually make HIV go away. Mm-hmm. And so he started on the protocol, and he got worse and worse day by day. Mm-hmm. He looked like a skeleton of a man. It was really hard to witness that. And my mother was concerned because she would tell the doctors, this is not working. He's getting worse. And I'm concerned about my son. And they said, no. He's just acclimating to the medicine. And if you take him off it, he will die. And so very similar to what's happening right now in America with so many people that were coerced and forced into getting the vaccine, and then it ended up damaging their loved ones. They're dealing with that right now, the grief, the shame, the guilt of that. And my mom was a cancer survivor, lived with cancer for 20 years and would have lived a long life. But the guilt and the shame of knowing that she was part of the decision to keep my brother on that deadly protocol, and she didn't listen, because my brother's community was saying the medicine is killing people, not the virus, the medicine. It was so much for her to handle that she allowed her cancer to come back, and within 34 days after my brother's death, my mom died. And so it was a huge wake-up to me, and I developed this distrust for Western medicine at that point, as you can understand. As a young man, I think I was 23. But I went on to pursue my career in Hollywood, and I was in front of the camera for a few years and really fell out of love with that very fast. I didn't like the attention. I was much more interested in watching what the crew was doing, and how they were lighting the set. So then I went to behind the camera. I built my own theater. I taught acting for a number of years and directed stage and theater plays and really cut my teeth doing that. And then I went to, first thing I ever did behind the camera was in the heyday of infomercials, I was asked to co-direct an infomercial for the Vitamix machine. Okay. And it did really well. And so suddenly I'm directing infomercials of all things, which actually informs some of my work right now, because you have to learn a lot of how to understand the audience that you're speaking to, because they're long-form commercials, right? And you know how well you've done by the sales,
the reaction,
of the product that you're selling, right? So, so it was a great education for me to understand the psychology of how to speak to the audience through the medium of video. And but then flash forward, I stayed out of politics. I was totally allergic to anything that sounded like a conspiracy theory. Every time I'd hear the word Illuminati or all this stuff that people would pass around Hollywood, I would just roll my eyes. I wanted nothing to do with anything that sounded like some crazy conspiracy theory. But then I'm on the road. Bernie comes out, and I get inspired by his rhetoric, and I get really fired up. And he's passing through my hometown. I get a press pass, and while I'm filming him, a couple of celebrities that were traveling with him, one of them had been following. I used to release a lot of videos, father-son videos on Facebook, and they became very popular. So Rosario Dawson, the actress, she had been sharing a lot of my videos, and she came up and saw me behind the camera and said, "Why don't you go on tour with us? We're doing a whole tour with Bernie, all the way from California to Philadelphia, and we'd love to have you." And I said, "Sure, let's go." And so I jumped on the road with them and traveled from California to Philadelphia. And in that time is when the Great Awakening happened, political awakening happening for me, because I started seeing these young people that were wearing Che Guevara shirts and Lenin shirts and Mao Zedong hats and stickers and communist sickle and hammers on their laptops and their water bottles. And I asked one kid, I said, are you trying to be edgy? What is that about on your laptop there? And then, they kind of pulled me behind the curtain and they said, well, democratic socialism, we're all democratic socialists, and what we really want is communism. And I laughed. I thought, you're joking, right? And he said, no. But I can tell by the way you're reacting that you think it's the communism that, no, because it's a different kind of communism, and it's one that's never been attempted, and it's benevolent, and as I sort of drill in, how does it work? What is good about it? Why is it different? It basically led to the state owning and controlling everything. We're going to redistribute the wealth. Okay, where does that money go to, and then how does it get redistributed? Through the government. I said, so you're giving the government more and more of your tax money, more and more power. Do you understand this is not a new communism? This is what has always happened. I know enough about that to know that, at least. And so it was a shocker for me. Long story short, I came off the Bernie tour brokenhearted, and it was my political awakening. I wanted nothing to do with politics ever again. And that's when I started to do my research and study what was really going on with this thing called democratic socialism. And all roads trace back to China and influence from other Soviet Marxist ideologies that have already been attempted and been atrocious around the world. And so I thought I have a moral obligation, now that I helped elevate Bernie's campaign and this message, I need to spend the rest of my life on the other side of this, and now being a better journalist and undoing some of the damage that I feel that I was part in and perpetuating.
Well, and somewhere along the way, COVID happened.
Yes.
And so how did you react to that?
Well, so a year before COVID happened, I was introduced to Dr. Judy Mikovits. And I was told that she had an Aaron Brockovich type story and that we should turn it into a movie. So I met with Judy, and I liked her immediately. And I knew that she was an honest person. I could just get that she might be wrong about data, but she's telling the truth from her perspective. Let me look into this conversation I had with her. And everything checked out, and it was kind of shocking to me. But I was committed at the moment to a documentary that I was making called The Narrative, to expose Western media, because I'd also done a lot of jobs in mainstream media. And I've been in boardrooms, and I know how it works, and I was so tired of it being so divisive and doing so much damage. And as a father, I just thought I have to expose Western media. And so I told Judy, I said, unfortunately, I can't make your film. I'm tied up for the next 18 months, but I'll pitch it around, because I think it's a movie that needs to be made. Flash forward a year later, Plandemic is announced. I knew immediately. As soon as I saw Anthony Fauci, I remembered. And so I immediately called Judy, and because I remember from my talk with her that she worked with him. And I said, I want to get your take on this. What do you see? And she started to go, as Judy does, a mile a minute. And I ended up inviting her to my studio, and I said, let's do a little interview just like we're doing now, and I'll edit it together on my own, and I'll pay for it. And I'll put it out on my Facebook, and I'll give it to you, and maybe you can use this to get your movie made, because I always felt bad I wasn't able to make our movie. As I'm doing the interview, I'm listening to it, and I'm thinking to myself, if this is true, the world needs to know this. And so I took that footage, I edited our interview, and then I asked her to give me all the contacts from everyone, attorneys, prosecutors, everyone that she had experienced, that she had contacts to during her trial and everything that happened to her. I called every single one of them, and every single one of them said, everything she's telling you is true. That is one of the most honest ladies. Her one attorney said, he goes, I have no dog in the fight. I don't represent her anymore. That was 10 years ago. I'm going to let you know she's the most honest client that I had ever represented. She's a wonderful woman. Trust what she says. And I said, wow. Okay, and then I started to look up Ralph Barrick and the NIH and the University of Chapel Hill and all these things that she mentioned, the Bayh-Dole Act, and everything checked out. And I realized this is more important. I need to raise a little bit of money, turn this into a short documentary, and take this serious because I think there's a bombshell of information here. So we did that, put it out in the world, and to my absolute, utter shock, I thought the ticker counter was broken on Facebook because just overnight it's getting millions of views. And at the beginning, Jan, it was just people saying thank you. There are people crying, saying you had this helped me realize I'm not crazy. I knew something was going on, and it felt wonderful. 2 days later, after this thing goes mega viral and has hundreds of millions of views, the media steps in, and because all they could see online of me that I was a lefty, they couldn't call me far right. They couldn't put me in that category of neo-Nazi. And so they just went hard after attacking my character, my wife, my family. So much so that my little town, which is known for being one of the conscious meccas of California, which was Ojai, California, someone online started a petition to make my family move. And they were reporting us to Child Protective Services to take our children, all for trying to wake people up to the realities of what was really happening. But that film goes on to become the most seen independent movie in history, with probably somewhere around 1.5 billion views at this point, because of the power of the people. I gave the file to the world and I said, download it because I know that they're going to shut my accounts down. Put it on your computers and share. And the world became our distribution model. And I'm forever grateful for the people for doing that. And they've continued to do that with the entire series.
Astonishing story, and of course there's been multiple, I guess, sequels now to the original film, with this Great Awakening most recently, and I think a musical coming. Like
that's right.
Now,
people think it's some kind of a joke or a meme online, but no, we actually created Plandemic the musical, which is marking. I said, let's go out with a bang. For me, it's time to move on to other work, and so the musical for me is it's only 20 minutes long, but it's an epic little movie that we've been working on for 2 years, and it's a real call for people to stand up and to revive their creative genius and bring their their unique gifts to this fight, this historic fight. And it's actually exceeded my expectations. The musical, it was risky, it was fun. To have an idea, it was. I think it was 3 years ago. We were actually at Del Bigtree's house, Buddy and another, very beloved freedom fighter out in the world, and I maybe induced by a glass or two of wine. My friend had a acoustic guitar who turned out to be the musical director of Plandemic, the musical, Deepak, and we were making up songs, trying to make light. The world was at lockdown at that time, and here we are, all 50 people, no mask, and drinking wine and enjoying, Thanksgiving dinner, and we're singing parody songs, and it was so fun and entertaining that I looked around the room and I realized we need to. We're not poking fun at this because it's a very serious tragedy, the greatest crime against humanity ever, and people have suffered and died. So we're not poking fun at it, but it's time to use the power of comedy and music and the human genius to also recognize that while they're chipping away at everything worth living and dying for, while they're making jokes a crime, a punishable crime, while they're canceling everyone for daring to think for themselves It's time for us to counter that and go in the other direction, kind of what happened in the age of the Renaissance. That's why you see the costumes are so fabulous. People were so oppressed by the Dark Ages that when they came out so fabulously, you know, to say, I'm here, we've arrived, I'm back, and I'm not going to let this darkness smother me any longer. And so I feel like that's what's going to really make the difference globally, is when that creative, colorful, beautiful human spirit is unleashed again, because it's been so oppressed, and that we reverse engineer the agenda. And what I mean by that is, what are we afraid of? And sometimes it's best, instead of to run away from what we're afraid of, but to run into it. So everyone's trying to evade being canceled these days. So I say to everyone, get canceled. Do everything in your powers. Honestly, it's difficult in the beginning once you understand that you have a lot of people that are posing as friends that suddenly turn on you. It's shocking. But the other side of getting canceled, honestly, they say the truth shall set you free. It is the pathway to freedom. Because now I can just be me, say what I want to say, and all the people around me in my life know what I stand for, and they stand there with me. And I'm no longer, when I was part of the far left, I realized we're all bonded by agreement. We're not bonded because we love each other, because we relate to each other, because we're chemically attracted to each other. We're bonded by ideological agreements. And if I don't check every single box within this cult, I'm out. It's a very fragile way to be in relationship with people. And people are waking up to that right now. They're realizing, they're saying, I'm all for the trans movement, but I don't know that 250-pound men should be biological men should be competing in MMA against women. We've already seen one female have her skull crushed. I don't know. Oh, you're out of the club. You have to agree with check every single box. That's what we call collectivism. And that's what you have to do to be able to survive within a collective based upon and bonded by agreement, is you have to shut down your critical thinking ability, your individual thinking ability, so that you are not constantly challenged by the statements and beliefs of your tribe. You have to just shut it down and go, I'm safer not to think, safer not to listen to what they're really saying, safer not to examine these ideologies that I'm marching for. You know, I don't even think about it, just march. Just hold up the sign. And you see this when you see man on the street interviews of people, that they're out there marching and so absolutely passionate about a cause, and then somebody puts a mic in their face and they ask them a simple question of, like, you know, one thing might be, you know, Trump is a racist, absolute racist. Can you give me one example of where he's a racist? Well, it's obvious everywhere. Well, just one example. Well, I mean, he said find people on both sides. No, actually that wasn't actually true, right? They've bought into something so passionately that it leads them to go to a protest and to chant something that they have no real world evidence to support. That's collectivism. That's the dangers of collectivism. That creates a hive mentality, and that is the way that China has captured 1.4 billion highly intelligent. Chinese people are disciplined, smart in general, smart, intuitive people. How do you get them to succumb to a model that they're living under right now? And that is collectivism.
You know, it's very interesting. You know, I started out as in China human rights before I kind of, came into Epoch Times. Epoch Times was one of the few outlets at the time that would remotely be honest about the Chinese Communist Party and its role in China and its impact on the Chinese people, and frankly, absolutely egregious crimes against humanity. I'll use that term, okay? Now, but you weren't looking for that. Like, for me, I knew this. I came in knowing that, right? So I want to understand that, and I think especially since our focus as a society, right now, and legitimately it's on, Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East, when we think about, our foreign engagements and so forth. But it's always away from, what I perceive as dramatically the greater threat. And I think, the evidence is overwhelming. But how did you come to that? What was your path there, right?
Well, I will say each subject that I could identify as an issue. And so sometimes I'll have a big whiteboard behind my editing bay, and as things come up as social issues, we'll write them down on the board. Border security, fentanyl, the indoctrination of our children with critical race theory, or whatever it might be. Boom, 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 boom. Certain names keep showing up. And why, if I want to look at the fentanyl crisis, one of the greatest killers of Americans right now, and I want to find out what's the source of that. And then you learn that almost 100% of it's coming from China. You go, well, that's interesting. We need to look into that further. Okay, let's look. What is this Confucius Institute thing? What's happening with this? And then you start to just look in general, what are the things that you can't criticize? What are the questions you can't ask? As they say, if you want to know the truth and you want to know who's actually ruling over you, just look at the people and things you can't criticize and you can't investigate. And the more I looked into this, the more I kept seeing all these recurring names. And I looked into the production of precious minerals, everything that develops our cell phones and the batteries, and I started to realize that even if they were an ally and wanted the best for America, even if that were the case, it's not, but even if that were the case, the power they have over us is even dangerous. Just being so dependent upon another nation in this way, the power they hold over us in terms of trade. And then to understand that much of the Marxist, socialist, communist ideologies that our college professors are passing on to their students these days, a lot of that has been exported also from China. And when you start to look at every area, you just can't deny at a certain point there's something happening here. And it's probably not good. It feels like we are being invaded, and that there's a war taking place, that perhaps these countries that realize that we all have nuclear power now, so a war at the scale of having two or more superpowers like America and China go to war with nuclear powers would pretty much lead to the annihilation of all countries. So how are we going to do this? And last time you and I sat down, we were in LA, and I think at that talk, someone asked me why I thought China was such a danger. And I want to be clear, I love the Chinese people, but I'm talking about the Chinese Communist Party. And I said the tortoise and the hare. And I think you said, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, we have been wired for instant gratification. We are moving so fast in the U.S. that we get frustrated when our cell phone, when the little wheel comes up for 3.5 seconds, we get frustrated. We want it now. And China and the Chinese mentality operates in a way that what some might call the 100-year sprint, right? Very meticulously, methodically, at a rate that you never will witness the grass growing in your yard, only till you step away for a few weeks and you come back and you realize it's grown. And so that's what makes it dangerous. We are the hare and they are the tortoise, in that we're running circles and exhausting ourselves with all these ideologies and arguing over all these superficial, trivial points, while China is laughing, Iran is laughing, Russia's laughing, and they're gradually encroaching on our territories, buying our land, our food supply, our technologies, spies everywhere, and with the intention to become the dominating superpower. What does that mean for the survival of Americans? I don't know. But that is taking place, and there's already predictions that China in just a few years will be the economic superpower of the world. And what does that mean? Our dollars collapsing? What will that mean for our future? It's time that we wake up and understand that we need, the answer for me is sovereignty. Everything must, in the same way that we developed a technology called blockchain, which is a decentralized technology, we need to start looking at how do we decentralize in such a way that we bring back that constitutional individual power, that we become self-reliant as the individual, as the county, as the city, as the nation, as every layer produces its own food, its own energy, its own power. So we move in the opposite direction of globalism, which is the centralization of everything. For me, that's the answer. Everything we choose, everyone who's running for office, if they're not focused on coming back to becoming sovereign again, us becoming a sovereign nation dependent upon no other nation, by literally knowing that we have it all within our nation, we can take care of ourselves, and every individual state and county also has that sovereign ability to say we're good. And just like every family at the micro level, every family, take care of yourself. Spend more time getting to know your children, because the children are being raised by iPads these days. Have dinner again at the table, speak to each other, talk about how we protect ourselves, come back into that those traditional roles where the father can be the father again and not just the stupid voice in the corner. And the mother can be that beautiful, nurturing, important figure in the upbringing of our children and an upbringing of our generations. Come back to those things, because those are the things that we've been lulled away from and convinced that they're wrong, that they're bad, that they're outdated, that they're the cause of why America has done so much damage in the world, and America has done much damage in the world, but not Americans, the American government. In the same way that we can't be so myopic to hate another nation's people because of what their authoritarian, tyrannical government has done. We need to start looking at each other as humans again, and not these machines under the stranglehold of a force that is all about division and dependency. And so what are we dependent upon? And can we come back to putting our hands back in the soil again, growing our own food again, educating our children, because our school systems, this is, you mentioned that we would get into the story regarding porn. I think it's one of the most demoralizing, dangerous tools being used to destroy both boys and girls now. It was a boy thing before, but it's now reached little girls. And females have surpassed men now in depression and anxiety. Now the women, look at TikTok and all the other apps where these women are pouring their hearts out in tears. They're 40, 45, 50 years old, realizing that they were bamboozled into a life that is now led them to loneliness and anxiety and depression, because they never had the gift of having a child, of having a man to love and protect them. And those are the things we have to recognize as the most destructive, the most dangerous. All of these ideologies that have repelled the innate primal attraction between men and women is where I want to start, by undoing that, to come back into our natural way of being and co-creating life together.
We're going to need to finish up in a moment. Two quick thoughts. First of all, talking about the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, we already know what they envision. It's this incredible power of the technocratic social credit system, all-encompassing, encroaching on every aspect of your life, right? And it's curious that in the West we've become ourselves more obsessed with creating a similar thing, and I think that also speaks to that subversion. I don't think it's the natural human inclination, not by a long shot. The second thing is, I would love to, and this is something we can discuss, but I would love to collaborate with you on a short episode on the effects of porn, because I truly have not been able to tackle this properly. Just very few people seem to really know much about it, very credibly, right? Just they're worried like me, right? That this is probably a massive issue that no one wants to touch. A lot of people don't even want to know about it, in a sense. So you're the audience. Like, I've observed that whenever I've tackled this issue, people are a little bit like, I don't think I want to know, right? I also understand that, but I also think it's incredibly important, exactly as you do, So perhaps we could, collaborate on something small to kind of expose this more, to understand it, it better.
I would love to.
And any final thought as we finish? Yeah.
Well, on that note, I recently directed a piece for Prager University called MIA, which is an acronym for Masculinity in America. And it was shocking to me, although I thought I was up to speed on the damage that porn has done. We had a lot of top experts in this short documentary talking about what has really transpired. And so I would be honored and would jump at an opportunity to get something like that out in the world and really get the latest statistics out there of what's happening, because it's a drug, and it's like all drugs, there are gateways that lead to deadly drugs. And so that's what porn has become. In my day, in our day, maybe it was Playboy was that was the big thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's starting with nude photos to softcore to hardcore, and it ends up in this world where strangulation porn.
Well, the things that have been described to me are unfathomable things.
It truly is. And when you have a 12-year-old boy thinking that women want to be choked when they're making love, it's a problem. And so some of these young boys have made that mistake in their exploration of their sexuality and have been charged with rape or something horrible, because all they know is they thought, well, that, dad didn't teach me. I have no, the dad isn't there for some reason. And I learned from watching these horrible people do this sacred act on camera. And so, anyway, it needs to be said, and we'll go deep into that. It's the moment we have some free time, we'll talk about that more. But in answer to your question, in closing, I do want to say to you that I appreciate what Epoch has done. I appreciate what you have done. I consider you to be one of the most classy interviewers out there today. Truly open, getting to know you and having conversations with you. The level of humility that you bring, knowing that you've sat down with people so much smarter than myself and have learned so much, yet you have this childlike curiosity about every subject as if you don't know it. Is what makes you so compelling to listen to, and the level of conversations that you've had. I've used a lot of the work that this network has done as my research, and I am just really grateful that you guys are doing what you're doing, and thank you so much for supporting me and my work also.
Well, that's very kind. Mikki Willis, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining Mikki Willis and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Yanya Kellick.